Welcome back, guys. In this video, I'm going to be looking at Dawah and how bad Dawah is. As I'm sure many of you know, Dawah for a long time now has been in retreat, particularly when it comes to the idea of the scientific miracles. Thanks to that now infamous video from Ali Dawah, where he openly said that the scientific miracles was debunked, it was garbage, it was complete useless, you shouldn't use it, it's all just a load of nonsense.
Comes from. And you know why many people in the Dawah, YouTubers, my colleagues, brothers that I work with, didn't do a video? Why did you say that? Because they know it as well. Because how can I give an understanding to the Quran, the ayah, with no qualifications? But a lot of people were very insecure because of the scientific, discoveries or whatever it may be. And we was trying to fit the scientific narrative into the Quran, which was a big mistake, because it's as if as good as we were making science the guideline for the Quran to be accepted. This is nonsense.
We've seen more Muslims around the world get used to the idea that actually what they were told about the so-called miracles in the Quran turned out to be absolutely nothing more than lies. Many Muslim da'is knew it was lies. They knew that this was something that wasn't true, that this had serious issues with it, and yet they didn't want Muslims to know, and they didn't make this public. Instead, they kept it a quiet secret because they knew that it would shake many Muslims' faiths, because many Muslims, like Ali Dawah, came into Islam specifically because of the scientific miracles. So something I've been interested to find out is exactly how are the da'is taking this news? Are they changing their tactics? Are they talking about different things? Are they giving different arguments as to why non-Muslims should join Islam? Are they changing things around now that these scientific miracles have been called out as being nonsense, as being lies and deception? Well, we have a video for you today. And spoiler, they're still using them. In fact, one of the greatest da'is, someone who sets the stage for other Muslims to look up to one day hope that they had the skills and the ability to waffle on like this da'i. One Muslim apologist who is well known among many others for his great ability in talking relentlessly at the person to the point where they want to leave, for running faster than the great Shamsi does, for being involved in the gradual destruction of Islam for at least 30 years at Hyde Park at Speaker's Corner. I am of course talking about this guy. So as you can imagine, I was quite surprised to see that the videos that he's still involved in and the lectures that he's still giving at people, at unexpecting people who don't want to be lectured at, but guess they're being polite, and so listen to it anyway. As part of his essay, speech, dialogue, Dawah script, whatever you want to call it, he's still going on about these scientific miracles. But we all know they've been debunked, so why is he doing it? Well, ladies and gentlemen, this illustrates a principle that I think many of us are familiar with, but it's important to really get this out there as much as we can so that people know that this is happening. Muslims are frequently lied to, especially when it comes to what their own Quran and faith teaches them. Their deen is, in effect, rewritten constantly, specifically when it's being offered to someone who isn't a Muslim. To someone who's been a Muslim for many years, Muhammad is a unashamed figure of masculinity. They don't shy away from the fact that he had multiple wives. He slept with them on most nights. In fact, there's hadith that say he slept with all of them in one night, and they're proud of that. They're proud of that. But when talking to someone who isn't a Muslim and they want them to become a Muslim, the script changes all of a sudden. So all of a sudden that's never talked about. What's instead talked about is how great of a moral example Muhammad is, and how much of a feminist he was, and how he set a record for women's rights and other things, quickly ignoring the fact that his first wife was already an established tradeswoman, which you would have thought wouldn't really been possible if there wasn't many female rights in those days. But hey, no one ever said this stuff was consistent. Muhammad is in effect a commercial product that is constantly repackaged depending on who the audience is. If the audience changes from primarily men to primarily women, all of a sudden Muhammad takes on these feminist tones. If he then goes back to being predominantly male audience, then all of a sudden Muhammad is this great warlord who conquered everything, slept with as many women as he wanted, had some very young wives, very, very young wives, and had as many as he wanted, and he had all these slaves, and look how amazing he was at taking all these things, and he took all the booty in more ways than one. If they're talking to a scientifically minded audience, then Muhammad was the greatest scientist since Isaac Newton. If they're talking to someone who values animal rights, then funny enough, Muhammad turns into a person that values animal rights. Isn't that a coincidence? If you're talking to an audience primarily of elderly people, then Muhammad is a great example for elderly people. If you're talking to a young audience, and he's a great example for young audience. And we know we get a lot of this from the Quran. In Surah 33, Ayah 21, there is a verse that says Muhammad is a great example to the Ummah, which of course kind of has to mean everybody, because every Muslim is a part of the collective Ummah. I think it's fair at this point to say that Muhammad has become commercialized. There is a commercial packaged version of him, of which is sold to different audiences depending on what they want to hear. You're interested in LGBT rights? Well, then Muhammad was... So anyway, onto the video. I'm going to show you a video that came out, I think it was about 2 months ago, so probably just slightly before the whole revelation that all of the scientific miracles in the Quran are all nonsense and they should be totally thrown away, and they're not true at all. So just before that, and I just want to show you the kind of thing that was being said, and to this day I think is still being said. It takes advantage of people's ignorance, right? People don't know any better. People don't know that this sort of stuff has been debunked by the great and wise Ali Dawah, and we are indeed proud of that. Let's watch the video.
What he claimed and what he preached and what he brought as the Quran. If we find someone's deluded, would he then claim to know about science and metaphysics and astronomy and biology and botany and economics and anthropology and X, Y, and Z? Because a deluded person is just simply deluded. He doesn't have the understanding of critical thinking to have the sanity to say that yes, I'm actually in my sane sense.
Whoa, straight off the bat, Muhammad is what? He claims to have knowledge of science, metaphysics, astronomy, biology, botany, and economics, and anthropology. That's a lot of different ways you can package up Muhammad. There's still this idea in Muslim circles that the Quran tries to have everything and be everything all at once, because they still have this view that God is perfect, the Quran is his speech, therefore the Quran has to be perfect in every conceivable manner, and that practically means it ends up being everything to everyone for every purpose perfectly, which is just obscene because that's not how language works. When you communicate a message, you focus on what the message is, not on just cramming every possible category of truth you possibly can in a very finite space. That makes no sense.
You can think so. You can think so. Then you have to ask yourself, how does he then talk about interoceanic waves?
Okay, so now he's going to talk about interoceanic waves. And keep in mind, the part that you just heard there was in the context of him trying to make the argument that Muhammad was sane, which is kind of a weird thing to start with. I mean... Usually when I make an argument that someone knows what they're talking about, I don't have to start with the premise that they're actually sane. I kind of assume that that's the case beforehand. Keep in mind that this person that he's having a dialogue with isn't making an argument that Muhammad is insane. Rather, she's making the argument, just plain and simple, that he got things wrong. There is a world of difference between arguing someone was incorrect and in error about what they taught and being clinically insane. But for some reason, they like to frame it as, oh, it's always a talk about sanity, because for them, they want to pigeonhole into this idea that either Muhammad was insane or he was a prophet, and there can't be anything else, which is a really weird dichotomy to try and force the conversation into, but they don't really have much choice here, like, let's be honest. So I guess that's what they have to do. Oh, keep in mind, her eyebrows are exposed, so they've had to blur her out for the purposes of doing dawah.
He's never been to sea. His people have witnessed that he's never been to sea. But he's talking about the existence of interoceanic waves and darkness within this deep sea. A deluded person is not someone who goes and studies. That's not delusion, because you will not be deluded anymore. You will be enlightened with knowledge. You will not be called deluded. But he's coming up with information that goes against any concept of being deluded.
Okay, so let's deal with this whole interoceanic waves thing. So the Quran verse he's referring to is Surah 24, Ayah 40, which basically gives this impression that the ocean is deep and dark and that there are waves on the top of it and that supposedly there are waves above those waves. Now they interpret that to mean interoceanic waves. I don't see why anyone would do that. I think the more obvious explanation, especially given this is an analogy to describe the state of the unbelievers, is that it's just turmoil on treacherous seas. That's all that's been described here. It's very dark. There are lots of very aggressive waves overlaying other waves and clouds above. I think that's just setting up a scenario to describe an analogy. That's it. There's nothing else there. It's not meant to have some super secret scientific knowledge that only Mansour has discovered in the 21st century. They also tend to tie this with the idea that, how did he know that the ocean was dark? How did he know this? Well, you see, I wanted to figure this out, right? Because, I mean, you can look at the scientific explanation, you look at the fact that certain wavelengths don't permeate through surfaces of water past so many meters. For example, the red wave won't go past 5 meters, for example, so any deeper than that, you have difficulty seeing the color red. There are things like that you can understand from a scientific perspective, right? That people would have known because it's pretty easy to go more than 5 meters underwater. I actually thought, hang on a sec, how can I get this from the most basic perspective here? And I thought, you know what do people who dive for a living do? So let's Google this real quick. When do you need light as a scuba diver? Let's try that. Google says, as its highlighted result, 20 to 30 feet. 20 to 30 feet roughly translates between 6 to 9 or 10 meters underwater. That's how far you can go before scuba divers will often bring out lights so they can better see under the water. What that means is, to the naked eye, when you travel just a few meters down, it gets darker. The scientific miracle has been revealed. It kind of sounds like basic knowledge that anyone would have known if they had ever gone into the ocean and tried to swim down. You can see pretty clearly now why this scientific miracles thing, Ali Dawah has distanced himself from it, because you know, it has the intellectual capacity of a small child. In fact, I think telling a small child that the further you go in the ocean, the darker it gets would not surprise them. I think they would probably already have an understanding that that's probably going to be the case.
He's talking about something like the universe is such that the earth and everything beyond this earth was actually joined together as one piece, and then it parted it, and it's expanding, and then it will contract back. Now, a deluded person to make things like that, when the dominant understanding at his time was the universe is static, it doesn't expand, it doesn't contract. Why is he making these things? Where is he getting this from? Not from his contemporaries' culture and science and technology of his time, because they don't even know that themselves.
And now he moves on to the absolute legendary case that the Quran says the universe is expanding. Want to know how to refute this real easy? The plain simple matter is the fact that modern translations, English translations of the Quran, changed the words because they knew what the modern scientific knowledge was, that the universe is expanding, and they wanted to represent that in their translation. So how did they do it? They quite simply just changed the word from expanse, meaning large vastness, to expanding, meaning the universe is expanding, it's getting bigger. If you look at the Yusuf Ali translation or the Pigful translation, these were done around the 1920s to 1930s. At this point, there wasn't this understanding, generally speaking, about the expansion of the universe being a solid scientific theory. That came later. So they didn't have the incentive to translate it the way that modern translations do now. And for that reason, they have no qualms about having a different wording. Isn't it suspicious that all the old English translations never used to say expanding, but all the ones now, today, in the modern scientific era of believing the universe is expanding, all changed the word? Isn't that weird? What a strange coincidence. I guess this is just another scientific miracle. Now here's a part of the video where Mansour tries to explain that Muhammad was not deluded because he was offered things and he rejected them. Now, first of all, that makes no sense, and I think anyone with a basic understanding of logic knows that that doesn't logically follow, right? You can be deluded and reject things, that obviously. But it's just brilliant the way he frames it, because I think he realizes he's saying something that he's gonna have a hard time proving, right?
He must have some motives for his. You make one motive which is sincerely deluded in thinking, and that's why he's saying I'm a prophet. But all the things that he's coming up with, it goes against a deluded individual. What could it be? Could it be that he wanted to have fame, authority, rulership, kingship? He wanted to be the leader. He wanted to have money and wealth. He wanted women. Guess what? All of that was offered to him. All of that was offered. He says, if you want to be the king, we'll make you the king. Because what happened was, as he persisted in telling people to worship God.
So according to Mansour, Muhammad can't be deluded because he was offered money and he was offered women. Now the funny thing is when he says that, he immediately doesn't say, and he rejected them. He just moves on to another point. Did you notice that? He never explicitly said, and he rejected these. He never had these, because he knows full well that Muhammad did have money and Muhammad did have women. He had between 9 to 11 wives, and as we know, he also had sex slaves. Mary the Copt, for example. I have no idea why he brought that up, because that's just a flat out lie. He just looked at this woman straight in the eyes and said, Muhammad turned down money and women. He never had money and women. They tried to give him money and women, but he just never accepted it. Yes, Muhammad was well known for his chaste life. Why do Muslims continue to let this guy get away with just lying to people? Wouldn't you prefer your da'is to be honest and, you know, not lie all the time? I mean, there are so many other things that you could say that are like 1,000 times better than what this guy is just coming out with. But apparently lies is how Dawah is done these days. Contrast this with the Christian position. Jesus actually was offered kingship, but his kingdom was not of this world. Jesus rejected the pleasures of this life and lived a sinless life, an actual one. According to Islam, Jesus is indeed sinless. It raises him above Muhammad. He was the Jewish Messiah for whom they had been waiting for hundreds and hundreds of years. He actually gave himself up willingly because he would rather die for the world than be made into a king and to live a kingly life. Muhammad lived like a king. More wives than you can shake a stick at, more sex slaves than you can shake a stick at. He owned multiple houses of which he gave to his wife. The guy was by no means financially desolate. Christ, on the other hand, lived a very modest life. He didn't own many houses. He humbled himself and came as a servant. The greatest man, who was not merely just a man, came down to serve humanity, even when humanity didn't deserve his time and his effort and his love. And he asked for nothing in return but to accept what he is doing. He is doing willingly, and in accordance with the will of the Father. This is why Christianity will always be superior compared to Islam, because Jesus as a person is morally superior in every single way, especially when contrasted with Muhammad, according to Islam's own sources. God bless you all. Have a great day.